My cousin walked into my bridal suite with red wine, spilled it down my dress, and smirked while I stood there covered in stains. When I told her to get out, she rolled her eyes and said, "Stop overreacting." I just stared at her. That was 9 months ago. Last week, she walked into court wearing a wedding gown and left in handcuffs. I got married last month, and while the day ended up being one of the happiest of my life, it almost turned into a disaster thanks to my cousin Lily. And before anyone says, maybe it was an accident, no. This woman has been jealous, petty, and outright mean to me since we were kids. She knew exactly what she was doing. Lily has always had this strange need to one-up me. If I got good grades, she'd loudly announce hers were better. If I got a cute new haircut, she'd get the same one the next week and claim she thought of it first. At family gatherings, she'd find little ways to humiliate me, like telling everyone I still slept with a nightlight when I was 12, which wasn't even true. By the time we were adults, it had only escalated. When I got engaged to my now husband Mark, she pretended to be happy for me, but every interaction had an undercurrent of shade. When I showed her my ring, she said, "It's cute. Mark must have gotten a good discount." When I told her the venue, she wrinkled her nose and said, "Oh, my friend had her second wedding there." And every time my wedding planning came up, she'd somehow bring up her own future dream wedding, as if to imply mine was small time. I kept her on the guest list because, well, family, and my mom begged me to keep the peace because Lily's mom is her sister and they're close. The weeks leading up to the wedding were stressful but manageable until Lily started making jokes about wearing white. I laughed it off at first, but the day before the wedding, she actually texted me a picture of a long cream-colored gown with the caption, "Don't worry, it's not pure white." I thought she was trying to get under my skin, so I ignored her. Big mistake. The morning of the wedding, everything was going smoothly. I was in the bridal suite with my bridesmaids, hair and makeup were done, and I'd just put on my dress, a custom A-line satin gown with lace sleeves that I had saved for over a year to buy. My mom had just started tearing up seeing me in it when Lily barged in, uninvited, holding a glass of red wine. I froze. "Lily, we're not doing drinks in here, it's..." Before I could finish, she stumbled slightly, and the wine went everywhere. Across the bodice, down the lace sleeves, splattering on the skirt, my jaw dropped. "Oh my god," she said in the fakest shocked voice I've ever heard. "I'm so clumsy. I hope it's not ruined." Not ruined? It looked like a crime scene. One of my bridesmaids rushed to grab towels, but Lily just stood there smirking. I know that smirk. She'd done this on purpose. She wasn't even apologizing, just giving these little fake gasps like she was trying to sound innocent. I lost it and told her to get out. She tried to protest, saying, "It was an accident, you can't just..." But I cut her off. "No, you've been trying to ruin this for months. Congratulations, you just did. Get the hell out of my wedding." She looked stunned, like she never thought I'd actually follow through. I pointed at the door. One of my bridesmaids grabbed her arm and physically ushered her out while she kept whining about how I was overreacting. Here's where karma came through. The venue staff had a backup dress. It was a floor-length ivory gown they keep for emergencies. Not exactly my style, but simple and elegant enough to work. My mom, bless her, kept everyone calm while I changed. We started the ceremony just 20 minutes late, but the best part? Lily didn't just leave quietly. On her way out, she made a scene in the lobby, yelling about how brides are so self-absorbed and it was just a spill. Multiple guests saw it, including my husband's side of the family. Later, I found out from one of my aunts that Lily had been bragging the week before that she was going to teach me a lesson about being a bridezilla. Apparently, in her mind, I'd been showing off by having a nice wedding, and she wanted to knock me down a peg. Well, it backfired. Hard. When people asked where Lily was during the reception, I told them the truth. She spilled wine on my dress on purpose, and I kicked her out. Word spread fast. By the end of the night, everyone knew what Lily had done, and I figured that was the last I'd hear from her. But 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a notification, a tagged post from Lily, accusing me of physically assaulting her. I clicked on it, and my stomach dropped. The post had over 2,000 shares already, and she'd added details that never happened, claiming I'd choked her and thrown champagne bottles at her head. My work email started pinging nonstop on my laptop as coworkers found the post since she'd tagged my company's Facebook page. I was still staring at my phone when it rang and Mark's name popped up. He sounded stressed and told me his HR department just called him in about domestic violence allegations circulating online. That's when I saw it. Lily had tagged both our employers in multiple posts. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her timeline and found 6 more posts, each one worse than the last. Jessica started texting me screenshots of posts I hadn't even seen yet, where Lily claimed I'd stolen her wedding ideas and copied her dream venue that she'd supposedly booked first. The comments were brutal, with dozens of Lily's friends calling me every name you can imagine. My phone rang again, and this time it was my boss asking me to come to the office immediately for an emergency meeting about the company's social media policy. I threw on clothes and drove there in 20 minutes. The meeting lasted less than 5 minutes before they put me on administrative leave pending an investigation into the reputational damage. I sat in my car in the parking lot afterward with my hands still shaking as I scrolled through message after message from strangers telling me I was trash. Mark kept texting asking if I was okay, but I couldn't even type back properly. Then Carol called and she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Beth had been calling every relative we had, telling them I'd physically attacked Lily and demanding they pick sides. 3 of my cousins had already blocked me on everything, and my great aunt posted that she was disgusted by my behavior. I was about to just turn off my phone when a text from Amanda popped up saying she had something I needed to see from the wedding. She'd been taking photos in the bridal suite when everything happened, and caught the whole wine incident on camera, including Lily's face right before she spilled it. We met at a Starbucks downtown the next morning, and Amanda pulled out her laptop to show me 12 crystal clear photos. You could see Lily's hand tilting deliberately, and her smirk in perfect detail in every single shot. She'd been documenting the bridal preparations, and happened to be doing a wide shot when Lily walked in with the wine. The photos showed everything from Lily checking where I was standing to the fake stumble to her expression afterward. Amanda offered to send me all the files immediately, and said she'd testify if needed. That evening, Mark and I sat at our kitchen table looking at all the evidence we had. He wanted to get a lawyer right away, but I thought maybe I could fix this within the family first. I decided to call Beth directly to try to explain what really happened. She picked up on the second ring, and immediately started screaming about how dare I assault her daughter at my own wedding. I tried to tell her about the photos, but she wouldn't let me get a word in before threatening to file a police report for assault if I ever contacted them again. My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone, and Mark wrapped his arms around me while I tried to process what just happened. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up Amanda's wedding photos from the shared folder she'd sent us the day before, scrolling through until I found the ones showing Lily with that wine glass walking toward me in the bridal suite. The next photo showed her mid-spill with wine splashing across my dress, while she had this tiny smirk on her face that the camera caught perfectly. I selected 5 photos that showed the whole thing happening and posted them on Facebook with just the caption, "The truth about what really happened." And within 20 minutes, my phone was buzzing non-stop with notifications. Wedding guests were sharing the post and adding their own comments about what they saw Lily do that day. And by the time an hour passed, it had over 50 shares with people tagging their friends who were there. My phone lit up with a notification that made my stomach drop when I saw Lily had responded to my post with her own, claiming the photos were obviously edited and that she was going to sue me for defamation. She'd included a photo of a dark bruise on her arm that definitely wasn't there at the wedding, saying I'd grabbed her so hard when I attacked her that she had to go to the emergency room. Mark immediately screenshot everything while I watched the comments explode with people taking sides, though most of the wedding guests were backing me up with their own witness accounts. 3 days later, I had to go back to work after HR finished their investigation and cleared me, but walking through the office felt different with people whispering and stopping their conversations when I passed. My boss pulled me into his office that afternoon and told me our biggest client had called with concerns about the social media situation and whether it might affect our company's reputation. I was sitting at my desk trying to focus on work when Jessica called, her voice shaking as she told me Lily had been messaging her on Instagram, demanding she tell everyone about my supposed violent history that didn't even exist. Jessica had saved all the screenshots of Lily's increasingly unhinged messages, including ones where she threatened to ruin Jessica's career if she didn't cooperate. I wonder what Lily's real goal was here, because this seems way too calculated for simple jealousy. The wine accident right after texting about wearing white feels like she planned this whole thing out. I called my other bridesmaids and found out 3 of them had gotten similar messages from Lily over the past 2 days, with threats ranging from posting fake stories about them to showing up at their workplaces. We created a group chat to share all the screenshots and document everything Lily was sending, building a file of evidence that was getting thicker by the hour. The next morning, I was home working remotely when I heard pounding on my front door and looked through the peephole to see Beth standing there red-faced and furious. Mom happened to be visiting to help me sort through wedding gifts, and she answered the door before I could stop her, immediately stepping between Beth and me when Beth started yelling for me to take down the photos and apologize publicly. Beth was screaming about how I was destroying Lily's reputation and future when Mom pulled out her phone and started recording, which made Beth even angrier. That's when Beth let it slip, saying Lily had told her weeks before the wedding that she was going to teach me a lesson for showing off with my fancy wedding. Mom kept recording as Beth realized what she'd just admitted, her face going pale as she tried to backtrack and claim she meant something else. Beth lunged for Mom's phone trying to grab it, but Mark stepped in from the kitchen, calmly telling Beth she needed to leave or he'd call the police for trespassing. Beth backed toward the door, screaming that she was going to destroy all of us and make sure everyone knew what kind of people we really were before storming out to her car. That night, I couldn't sleep at all, jumping at every notification on my phone and checking the locks on all the doors 3 times before bed. Every car that drove past made me peek through the curtains, wondering if it was Lily or Beth coming back to do something worse. I finally dozed off around 4 in the morning, but woke up an hour later in a panic, my heart racing from a nightmare about Lily breaking into the house. A week after the wedding incident, everything got worse when my boss called me into his office and told me the concerned client had decided to end their contract with us. It was a $500,000 annual account that made up a huge chunk of our company's revenue, and he suggested maybe I should start looking for other opportunities. My coworkers were avoiding me in the hallways, and I overheard someone in the bathroom saying I'd brought too much drama to the office. 2 days later, I was sitting at home trying to update my resume when the doorbell rang, and I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. They told me Lily had filed a report claiming I'd physically assaulted her at my wedding and they needed to take my statement. My hands started shaking as I invited them inside and grabbed the folder I'd been keeping with all the screenshots and evidence. The officers sat at my kitchen table while I showed them everything: the social media posts, the text messages about wearing white, the photos Amanda had taken of Lily with the wine glass right before the spill. I gave them Jessica's number and Amanda's contact info and the names of 6 other wedding guests who'd seen what happened. They took notes and asked me to email them copies of everything, which I did right there while they waited. After they left, I just sat there staring at the wall until Mark got home from work and found me still in the same spot 3 hours later. The next morning, a detective named Rivera called and said he'd be handling the case and would need to interview the witnesses I'd provided. Over the next few days, he talked to Jessica, who told him about Lily bragging the week before about teaching me a lesson, and Amanda, who had photos showing Lily holding the wine glass at a weird angle right before the spill. 4 other guests confirmed they'd heard Lily making threats and saw her deliberately tip the glass. By Thursday night, I was so exhausted from the stress that I couldn't stop crying, and Mark just held me on the couch while I sobbed about losing my job and now maybe going to jail over a lie. He kept saying we should go stay with his parents in Florida for a few days, but I refused because I didn't want to look like I was running away or hiding from something. Friday afternoon, Detective Rivera called with news that made me drop my phone. Not only was I completely cleared, but they were now investigating Lily for filing a false police report and criminal harassment based on all her online posts and the witness statements. He said the evidence was overwhelming and asked if I wanted to press additional charges for defamation and emotional distress. Before I could even process this, Lily went completely nuclear and posted a video on every social media platform, claiming I'd paid off the police police and the photographer to fake evidence against her. She started a GoFundMe called Help Me Fight My Rich Cousin's Corruption and actually raised $300 in the first hour from people who didn't know the real story. 2 weeks after my wedding, Detective Rivera called to tell me Lily had been formally charged with filing a false police report and cyberstalking. That same afternoon, the local news ran a story with the headline, "Wedding Guest Arrested After Viral Dispute," and suddenly my phone was blowing up with messages from every family member who'd seen it. Half of them were apologizing for believing Lily's lies and saying they had no idea she'd taken things this far. The other half were telling me I'd gone too far by getting the police involved and that family should handle things privately without ruining someone's life. My mom called crying because her sister Beth was furious with her and blaming our side of the family for Lily's arrest. The next day, I met with a lawyer who specialized in defamation cases, and he spent 2 hours reviewing everything I'd documented. He said I had solid grounds for both civil and criminal cases against Lily, and that her video claiming I'd paid off the police was actually making things worse for her legally. He quoted me a retainer fee that made my stomach drop, but then Mark's parents called from Florida that night. They'd seen everything online and were absolutely furious about what Lily had put us through, and insisted on paying all the legal fees to make sure she faced real consequences. Mark's mom kept saying, "That woman needs to learn you can't just destroy people's lives without consequences," and his dad was even angrier about the workplace harassment that cost me my job. The next morning, Beth posted Lily's bail, and within hours, they'd started a new social media campaign called Justice for Lily, where they claimed police corruption and started posting my actual home address and the name of my former workplace. They encouraged people to call and complain about me, and posted photos of our house from Google Street View with captions about how we could afford to bribe officials. My lawyer started tracking everything they posted and noticed something weird. Every time we made progress with the police or got good news, Lily would post something crazier within hours. When the restraining order got approved, she claimed I'd poisoned her at a family dinner years ago. When her first arrest made the local paper, she posted that Mark had been stalking her for months. My lawyer documented every single post with timestamps showing the pattern. 2 nights later, I woke up to breaking glass downstairs. Mark grabbed the baseball bat from under our bed while I called 911. We found a brick on our living room floor surrounded by broken glass. A piece of paper wrapped around it had "liar" written in red marker. The security camera we'd installed after the first arrest caught everything. Someone in a bright pink jacket threw the brick and ran. The same pink jacket Lily wore everywhere. The police came within minutes and took the brick as evidence. They downloaded our security footage right there in our kitchen. The next morning, Detective Rivera called to say they'd enhanced the video. The face was clear enough to identify Lily. They issued a new warrant for vandalism and violating her bail conditions. Mark spent the rest of that day installing more cameras around the house, motion sensors on every door and window, a full security system with panic buttons. I couldn't sleep without checking the locks 3 times. Every car that drove by made me jump. Every knock at the door sent my heart racing. I kept the curtains closed all day. The house felt like a prison, but at least we were safe inside. 3 days later, Detective Rivera called again. They'd arrested Lily at Beth's house that morning. Beth had screamed at the officers in her front yard while all the neighbors watched. Someone filmed the whole thing on their phone. Beth kept yelling about persecution and corruption while Lily got handcuffed. The video went viral on local Facebook groups within hours. That's when the local news station picked up the story. Amanda gave them copies of all the wedding photos showing the wine spill. She had dozens of shots from different angles. Wedding guests started calling the station to share their stories about what they saw. One guest had filmed Lily's lobby meltdown on their phone. Another had screenshots of her posts from before the wedding. The news ran a whole segment about the case. They interviewed 3 different wedding guests who all said the same thing about Lily's behavior. The next morning at work, everything changed. People who'd been avoiding me started saying good morning again. My boss called me into his office and apologized for doubting me. He said my job was safe and I could take time off if I needed it. That weekend, Jessica organized a girls' night at her apartment. All my bridesmaids came over with wine and snacks. We hadn't all been together since the wedding. Everyone hugged me and said they were sorry about everything. Then the stories started coming out. Lily's criminal career path took quite the turn, from wine-spilling wedding guest to brick-throwing vandal in a hot pink jacket, because nothing says stealth mode like wearing your signature bright color during a crime spree. One bridesmaid said Lily had keyed her car after she got promoted. Another said Lily spread rumors about her cheating on her boyfriend. Jessica told us Lily had tried to get her fired from her job by calling in fake complaints. Nicole, my quietest bridesmaid, dropped the biggest bomb. She said Lily had cornered her fiancé at Nicole's engagement party and tried to kiss him. When he pushed her away, Lily told everyone Nicole was paranoid and making things up. Nicole had never told anyone except her fiancé because no one would believe her. We sat there realizing Lily had hurt every single one of us over the years. The next morning, a courier knocked on our door with an envelope. Mark signed for it while I watched from the stairs. Inside was a letter from a law firm representing Beth and Lily. They were threatening to sue us for emotional distress and demanding $50,000. The letter claimed we'd orchestrated a campaign of harassment against them. It said we'd bribed officials and manipulated evidence. Mark crumpled it up and threw it across the room. I called our lawyer right away and told him about the letter. He actually started laughing when I read it to him over the phone. He said their claims were desperate and ridiculous. Within 2 hours, he'd drafted a countersuit for defamation. We were seeking $200,000 for my lost wages and all the stress they'd caused. He filed it that afternoon. The next few days felt almost normal for once. Mark and I cooked pasta together on Friday night and watched old movies. We turned off our phones and just focused on each other. He brought up the idea of us both starting therapy to deal with everything. I agreed immediately because the anxiety was eating me alive. We found a therapist who specialized in trauma and booked appointments for the following week. 3 weeks passed without any major drama, which should have been a warning sign. I was at my desk eating lunch when the receptionist called me. She said there was someone outside with a sign about me. My stomach dropped. I ran to the lobby windows and saw Lily standing on the sidewalk. She was holding a huge poster board that said, "Megan Thompson person is a bridezilla bully," in red letters. People were stopping to stare and take pictures. Security was already heading outside. They told her to leave, but she started screaming about her rights. 2 police officers showed up within minutes. They arrested her for trespassing since she was on company property. My boss pulled me into his office an hour later. He said the company was filing for a restraining order on my behalf. The legal department had already started the paperwork. The judge approved it the next day based on all the evidence of harassment. That same evening, my phone started blowing up with texts from relatives. Beth had created a blog called The Truth About Megan and sent the link to everyone. The site was full of made-up stories about me being a bully in childhood. She'd even photoshopped old pictures to make them look bad. One showed me at age 10 supposedly pushing another kid, but it was clearly edited. She wrote that I'd stolen boyfriends and cheated on tests and hurt animals. None of it was true, but she made it sound so believable. My mom finally lost it when she saw the blog. She called Beth and I could hear her yelling from across the house. She told Beth their 40-year friendship was over. She said Beth had enabled Lily's sickness for too long and needed to get her daughter help. Beth hung up on her. I started therapy the next week, and the therapist was really understanding. She diagnosed me with acute stress disorder from all the ongoing harassment. We worked on breathing exercises and ways to manage the panic attacks. The sessions helped, but I still jumped every time my phone rang. More family members kept sending me screenshots of Beth's posts. She was getting more unhinged by the day. She started making threats about exposing secrets about Mark's family that didn't even exist. She claimed she had dirt on his parents and siblings. Mark's sister, Haley, who worked in social media marketing, came over to help us. She documented every single post and fake account Beth and Lily had created. We spent hours reporting them to the platforms. Haley got about 20 fake accounts banned in one afternoon. She showed us how to track IP addresses and save everything as evidence. Things were quiet for about a week after that. Then I got to work on Monday and found a flower delivery waiting for me. The security guard brought them up looking concerned. The card said, "Karma's coming, cousin," in Lily's handwriting. I called the police immediately. They pulled the security footage from the florist, and there was Lily, clear as day, ordering the flowers. She'd violated the restraining order. They arrested her that same day, and this time the DA wasn't playing around. 5 weeks after my wedding, the prosecutor called to tell me they were adding witness intimidation charges because Lily had been texting threats to my bridesmaids about what would happen if they testified. Jessica showed me the messages where Lily called her a traitor and said she'd make her life hell. The judge revoked her bail completely, and now she was stuck in jail until trial. Beth lost it when she heard and started a GoFundMe claiming we were some rich family destroying her poor daughter's life. She wrote this whole sob story about how we'd always looked down on them, and now we were using our money to buy the legal system. Mark checked it every day for a week, and it only raised $342, mostly small donations from the same 3 accounts that we figured were just Beth using fake names. I went back to work full-time, and my boss was amazing about everything. They put in new security protocols where visitors had to be approved in advance and gave me a panic button for my desk. He even assigned me to lead the Foster account, this huge project I'd been wanting for months, and told me he wanted to show the company stood behind me. Amanda, the wedding photographer, sent me a link one morning to her blog where she'd posted everything about what happened at my wedding. She included all the photos showing Lily with the wine glass, the ruined dress, her getting dragged out by security, even the shots of me in the backup dress looking shell-shocked. Her witness statement was right there describing exactly what she saw Lily do. The post exploded online and within 2 days had over 100,000 views with people sharing their own stories about toxic relatives at weddings. My inbox started filling up with messages from women all over telling me about their cousins or sisters or aunts who'd tried to ruin their big days. One woman said her sister-in-law wore a wedding dress to her ceremony. Another said her cousin announced her pregnancy during the first dance. Reading all these stories made me realize I wasn't alone in dealing with family members who couldn't stand to see others happy. 6 weeks after the wedding, we had the preliminary hearing, and Lily's lawyer tried to argue the whole case should be dismissed as a family dispute. The judge looked through the stack of evidence, the social media posts, the witness statements, the security footage, the threatening messages, and said the harassment was severe and persistent enough to warrant a full trial. That's when Beth completely lost control in the courtroom and started screaming that the judge was corrupt and we'd paid him off. The bailiff had to physically restrain her while she kept yelling about conspiracies and how we'd always had it out for them. The judge held her in contempt and she spent the night in jail, which only made her more convinced we were orchestrating everything. Mark and I met with our lawyer the next week to prepare for both the criminal case and our civil lawsuit. The evidence file was now this massive binder over 200 pages thick with every text, email, post, photo, and witness statement carefully organized with tabs and timestamps. Our lawyer said it was one of the most documented harassment cases she'd ever seen. Then out of nowhere, I got a Facebook message from some guy named Tyler, who said he was Lily's ex-boyfriend from 3 years ago. He said he'd seen Amanda's blog post and wanted me to know this wasn't the first time Lily had done something like this. He had screenshots of text messages from when they were dating, where she'd threatened to destroy his reputation and make his family hate him after he broke up with her. The messages were scary, similar to what she'd been sending about me, talking about karma and revenge and making people pay. I was at the grocery store a few days later when I saw someone with the same hair color as Lily near the frozen foods, and my whole body just shut down. My heart started racing. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my basket and everything spilled across the floor. The woman turned around and it wasn't even her, but I was already having a full panic attack in the middle of the cereal aisle. Mark had to leave work to come get me because I couldn't stop crying and shaking even after I knew it wasn't really Lily. That's when I realized this whole thing had messed me up way more than I wanted to admit. My therapist got me in the next day and spent the whole session just letting me cry and shake while she sat there with this calm look on her face. She pulled out this weird light bar thing and started explaining something called EMDR that could help with trauma, but I was barely listening because my phone kept buzzing with texts from Jessica about some new video Lily had posted from jail. I grabbed my phone, and there was Lily's face on a shaky video, claiming claiming I'd paid off witnesses to lie about her, and the comments were already piling up with people calling me names. Detective Rivera called within an hour to tell me they'd traced the phone to another inmate who'd smuggled it in, and now Lily was facing extra charges for contraband possession. Lily's rap sheet keeps growing, but I'm curious why she thought flowers with that message wouldn't immediately violate the restraining order. The Tyler reveal makes me wonder how many other exes have similar stories about Lily that nobody's heard yet. 2 days later, my mom called crying because the whole extended family had tried to do some kind of intervention for Beth, but she'd stormed out of my uncle's house screaming that they were all traitors who'd been brainwashed by my lies. The local news station reached out wanting to interview me about cyberbullying, and even though my hands were shaking the whole time, I managed to talk about how online harassment had real consequences and how scared I'd been in my own home. Mark held my hand through the whole thing, and afterwards we just sat in the car for 20 minutes not saying anything. The EMDR session started the next week, and it was the weirdest thing, just following this light back and forth while thinking about the wedding, and somehow it actually helped, even though I didn't understand how. I was walking out of my third session when Beth came out of nowhere in the parking lot screaming that I was a liar and a manipulator and she knew what I was doing. Another patient, this older guy with a cane, immediately pulled out his phone and called 911, while Beth kept yelling and trying to get around him to reach me. The cops showed up in less than 5 minutes and arrested her for violating the no-contact order that had been put in place after the grocery store incident. The prosecutor called me that afternoon to say they'd offered Lily a deal of 6 months in jail, 3 years probation, and mandatory psychiatric treatment, but she'd refused and demanded a trial instead. Mark suggested we do something to reclaim our wedding joy, so the next weekend we had Jessica and his brother Tom come over, and we renewed our vows in the backyard with just the 4 of us. No fancy dress, no big ceremony, just us saying the words we meant while the sun set behind the trees. 3 of Lily's old friends from high school reached out through my lawyer saying they wanted to testify about how she'd done similar things to them over the years, including one girl named Ashley, who Lily had stalked after Ashley got into a better college. My lawyer was building this whole case showing Lily's pattern of behavior when we got word that her lawyer had withdrawn from the case because of irreconcilable differences after Lily insisted she could represent herself better. The judge assigned her a public defender, but Lily kept interrupting him during their first meeting to tell him he was doing everything wrong. Then my lawyer found the real bombshell while digging through court records. Lily had been sued twice before for harassment, once by a coworker she'd tormented after the woman got promoted over her, and once by a neighbor whose engagement party she'd tried to ruin. The paper trail went back almost 10 years, showing complaint after complaint that had been settled quietly or dropped when people just wanted to move on with their lives. 2 months crawled by with depositions and hearings before the actual trial started, and when I walked into that courtroom on the first day, my stomach was in knots, but nothing prepared me for what Lily did next. She showed up wearing a long white dress that looked almost exactly like a wedding gown, complete with lace sleeves, and she told reporters outside it was her innocence dress, to show everyone she was pure of heart. The judge took one look at her outfit and immediately ordered a recess, telling her lawyer she had 30 minutes to find appropriate courtroom attire or face contempt charges. Lily stomped out, making sure everyone saw her angry face, and came back wearing a black suit, but she'd already made her point to the jury pool waiting outside. Amanda took the stand first, and the prosecution had her walk through every single photo from the wedding, showing them on a huge screen for the jury to see. The pictures showed everything in perfect detail, including the exact moment Lily tipped that wine glass with this sick smile on her face, and another shot of her smirking while I stood there covered in red wine. 6 different wedding guests testified over the next 2 days, and each one had witnessed Lily talking about ruining my wedding or making me pay for being a show-off. Beth couldn't keep quiet during their testimony and started screaming that they were all liars until the judge had security escort her out of the courtroom. On day 3, Lily's lawyer tried to keep her off the stand, but she insisted on testifying, and that's when everything fell apart for her defense. She started by denying everything, but within 20 minutes she was contradicting herself left and right, saying first it was an accident, then that I bumped into her, then finally blurting out that I needed to learn humility. The prosecutor asked her directly if she deliberately spilled the wine, and she actually said yes because someone needed to teach me a lesson about not showing off. During the lunch break, my grandmother, who'd flown in from Texas, grabbed my hand and told me she was proud of me for standing up to family bullies. The prosecution spent the afternoon presenting every piece of evidence, including Lily's social media posts calling me names and the security footage of her throwing that brick through our window. They showed text messages where she'd told friends she was going to make me sorry, and emails where she'd researched how to remove wine stains, which proved she'd planned it all along. That night, I could barely force down a few bites of dinner, and Mark kept reminding me that tomorrow it would finally be over one way or another. We tried watching our wedding video to remember the good parts before Lily ruined everything, but I couldn't focus on anything except what would happen in court. During closing arguments the next morning, Lily completely lost it and started screaming that I deserved everything that happened, and this wasn't over yet. The judge threatened her with additional contempt charges and had to clear the courtroom for 10 minutes to restore order. The jury only took 3 hours to deliberate before coming back with guilty verdicts on every single count, including filing false reports and cyberstalking and harassment and vandalism and witness intimidation. Beth collapsed right there in the courtroom, wailing that her baby girl was innocent, while EMTs rushed in to check on her. They said she was fine, just having a panic attack, but Lily just sat there staring straight ahead with no emotion on her face at all, like she'd checked out completely. A week later, we were back in the same courtroom for sentencing, and this time the room was packed with people who'd come forward after seeing the news coverage about Lily's trial. The prosecutor had asked if I wanted to give a victim impact statement, and I'd spent days writing and rewriting what I wanted to say. When they called me up to the podium, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the paper, but I forced myself to look right at Lily while I talked about the panic attacks that started after her harassment campaign. I told the judge about nearly losing my job when clients saw the fake posts she'd made about me being unstable and violent. I explained how I'd needed therapy twice a week week just to function normally again, and how I still checked my locks 3 times every night before bed. 2 other women Lily had targeted at her workplace stood up and described similar harassment patterns going back years with screenshots and documentation the prosecutor displayed on a screen. Then my mom walked up to the podium, and I could see Beth stiffen in her seat because they hadn't spoken since the arrest. Mom's voice cracked when she talked about losing her sister to this situation, and how Beth had chosen to enable Lily instead of getting her help years ago when the problems first started. She said our family gatherings would never be the same, and that 3 generations of cousins had been torn apart because one person's jealousy was allowed to grow unchecked into something dangerous. Beth started crying loudly, but Mom just kept reading her statement about how she'd watched me suffer for months while Lily played the victim. The judge listened to everything without much expression until it was time for sentencing, and then he cleared his throat and said Lily had shown a pattern of escalating criminal behavior with no remorse. He sentenced her to 18 months in state prison, plus 5 years probation after release with mandatory psychiatric treatment and anger management classes. He also issued a permanent restraining order that meant Lily could never contact me or come within 500 feet of me for the rest of our lives. Lily jumped up and started screaming that we'd all regret this and calling me names I won't repeat here, while the bailiffs grabbed her arms to drag her out. Beth collapsed again and had to be helped out by court officers, while Lily kept screaming threats until they got her through the door. Outside the courthouse, Beth was already talking to reporters with mascara running down her face, saying this was a miscarriage of justice, and her daughter was being persecuted for a simple accident. She said she'd appeal and fight this until Lily was free and the real criminals, meaning me, would be exposed. Mark grabbed my hand and we walked past without saying anything because our lawyer had told us not to engage with her at all. That night I thought I'd feel relieved or happy, but instead I just felt empty, like there was this huge hole where all the stress and fear had been. My therapist had warned me about this and reminded me during our session that getting justice doesn't instantly fix trauma and that healing would take time. 2 weeks later, we were back in court for the civil trial, which went much faster since Lily had already been convicted criminally. The judge ordered her to pay me $150,000 in damages for defamation, emotional distress, and lost wages from when my company lost that client. Beth had to put her house up for sale to pay for Lily's appeals and the damages, which I heard about from my aunt, who still talked to her occasionally. Beth showing up in her innocence dress, looking like a bride at her own criminal trial, takes delusion to new heights. Guess she figured if white works for weddings, why not felony convictions? Over the next few weeks, different family members started reaching out with apologies for believing Lily's lies or staying neutral when they should have supported me. Some of them seemed genuine, and I slowly started responding to their messages, but others were clearly just trying to avoid family drama, so I kept my boundaries firm with them. My boss called me into his office a month after the trial ended, and I thought I was in trouble, but instead he promoted me to senior manager. He said the way I'd handled everything with grace under pressure showed leadership qualities, and that the company had actually won back the client we'd lost after they saw the truth come out in court. Mark surprised me with tickets to Costa Rica for the belated honeymoon we never got to take, and for 2 weeks I didn't check social media or news sites even once. We ziplined through the rainforest and went whitewater rafting and ate fresh fruit on the beach, and it was the first time in months I felt like myself again. 3 months after the wedding, I finally felt ready to join a support group for people who'd been through cyberbullying and harassment. The first meeting was hard, but hearing other people's stories and sharing mine without judgment helped more than I expected. There were 6 other people in the group, and we met every Tuesday in a community center basement, drinking bad coffee and talking about everything from dealing with triggers to rebuilding trust in relationships. One Tuesday after group, I found a thick envelope from Beth waiting in my mailbox with a return address from some therapy center in Asheville. My hands shook opening it, and inside were 3 pages of her handwriting talking about how she was working on herself, but still saying things like how I should have handled Lily differently, and maybe if I hadn't been so focused on my wedding, none of this would have happened. I read it once, then tossed it in the recycling without responding because I was done letting her make me responsible for Lily's choices. The bad days still came sometimes when I'd see a woman with Lily's build or hair color at the grocery store, and my heart would start racing, but the panic attacks were getting less frequent, and I could usually calm myself down within a few minutes, instead of hours. Jessica surprised me one Saturday by decorating her backyard with lights, and inviting just our closest friends for what she called my real wedding reception, with no drama and no family politics. She'd even bought me a simple white sundress to wear, and we danced to all the songs I'd picked for my actual wedding, while Mark spun me around laughing and our friends cheered. 2 months later, my grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep, and at the funeral, Beth showed up but stayed in the back row, not making eye contact with anyone from our side of the family. Mom told me later that she and Beth had started meeting for coffee once a week, with Beth finally admitting in therapy that she'd enabled Lily for years and was trying to understand why. 6 months after the wedding, I was making breakfast when my phone buzzed with a news alert that Lily's appeal had been denied and she'd serve her full 18 months. I deleted the news app right there at the kitchen counter and made Mark promise not to tell me any updates about her case. Around that time, I started a blog about surviving family harassment and cyberbullying using a fake name, but sharing real details about what helped me heal. Within weeks, I had hundreds of comments from people going through similar situations, and it felt good turning my worst experience into something that could help others. Mom mentioned that Beth was seeing the same therapist now and starting to understand how she'd always made excuses for Lily instead of holding her accountable, but they'd probably never be close like before. By Thanksgiving, Mark and I hosted dinner at our place with Jessica and 5 other friends who'd supported us through everything, and nobody mentioned Lily or the trial once. The week before Christmas, a letter arrived from the Women's Correctional Facility with Lily's prisoner number on it, but I didn't even open it, just handed it straight to my lawyer to file with all the other documentation. Now I walk into my office every morning wearing clothes I bought with the settlement money, and on my desk sits the photo from our backyard ceremony, where Mark and I finally said our vows in peace. Yesterday, a new client complimented my confidence during a presentation, having no idea about the journey it took to rebuild myself. I smiled genuinely for the first time in months, knowing I was finally free from Lily's shadow and could just be myself without constantly looking over my shoulder or waiting for the next attack. Thanks for letting me wonder about all these twists and turns with you. It's been quite the journey together, hasn't it? If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.